We actually have 3 sites. One in Tucson is the main site. We have a team in San Jose and in Japan, and then also a research division that works on tape in Zurich. So we're multi-site, but the main organization that delivers the products is out of Tucson. Yeah, it's funny. We have been talking about the renaissance of tape for what? 5 years, since the Renaissance, since the Dark Ages. Predicting this to happen, and it has happened, that people can't keep up with their data demand using hard drives. It is slowing down, and so you're either having to do one of 2 things now. You're either going to have to blow out a wall in the data center and put in more footprint, or buy tape, or push it into the cloud, in which case it will go on tape also, because it's really, there's no answer to storage demand in dollars per terabyte. That's starting to come back to where we always thought it would be, and that's where it's coming home to roost, if you will. I think when you're talking about flash versus others, it depends upon the scale at which you're talking. And if you're talking about a typical data center, most people are thinking the trade-off between flash and hard drives. And I think that most people, for, we'll say, normal business processes, like we would say traditional, most people believe the tipping point's there, as they used to call it, and flash is becoming the economical place to put your data for database management, all the business processes that we've talked about. If you talk to somebody like Microsoft, when they're here talking about their cloud infrastructure, flash is a piece of it from a performance ingest point of view, but not a large piece from a long-term storage point of view, or we'll say a storage point of view on the long run. So I think when you talk about flash versus other storage, it really is what part of the spectrum you're talking about. I think from an archive perspective, it's kind of a speed up the ingest, but not a storage medium. We thought initially it was a media entertainment industry thing. Edit videos, dump it to tape, bring it back into flash. But it turns out that that use case of there's a repository of data that has value that you do something with, medical information, seismic information, that is kind of becoming a use case that is typical, where I store something, I want to make value out of it, I'm going to analyze it to find oil, whatever. It is being brought back onto flash more often now than it used to, because of the speed of being able to read it for the analytics cycle. So it does seem the FLAPE story is coming about, but not specifically as much in the media entertainment as more broadly in any industry where you have a repository that requires some sort of analytics. The analytic cognitive thing is actually driving it, if you will. The more people are having that problem with, I don't have enough space to put everything I want to keep, the more they're turning around and looking for something to solve that problem. And as I said, they can either go to a cloud service, which is fairly expensive still today. People were waiting for optical. That's not going to pan out and be a cost-effective means of storing. And so tape is becoming that thing they're coming back and looking at again. And LTFS was kind of bifurcated between 2 parts of the market, if you will. Very low end, single drive guys trying to get stuff in and out of a remote repository or aggregation somewhere, and they need to collect it all up and send it to the mothership. We're finding a fair amount of usage in that, in media entertainment, for an example. And then on the other end of the spectrum, these people that say, okay, I'm blowing out my net app or something, I need to find more storage, are starting to look at those aggregated, what we call spectrum archive systems, where you have a file system that's a unified namespace. You don't have to worry about there's a cartridge underneath it, and starting to just move copies to those sorts of archives. And I would say our biggest surprise in the last 2 years has been, we expected most people who would be using that would be centric around something like media entertainment, like I've said that twice, seismic, some of those traditional use cases. Really half of our business is just general IT. And it's a whole spectrum of things people are putting into it, from catalogs to New York to genome data, stuff like that. So the broad usage of it has been a surprise, if you will. I don't think so, not with the LTFS. But there's a lot, when you talk about tape, you always get, as you know, the traditional use case of tape was a backup system. In the last 5-6 years that we've been talking, it's all about been transitioning from a backup medium that was driven by unique applications to a general purpose file store / archive use case. Some of that is becoming backup again to a file system where it's just simply kind of like a replica mirror sort of use case. In the mainframe, I think it's going through a similar transition from the big all-powerful HAL thing down to a distributed system running a lot of different applications for an enterprise. And in that use case, data is ending up on tape again. It's also the backup to mainframe. So we're pretty both sides of the equation if you talk about a Z system.